Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the shooting of Breonna Taylor. Now, I do apologize for this being exceptionally belated. I know this was like 5 months ago when this occurred and transpired, but I'm going to do it now. And the thing about this is, first of all, I wanted to offer my condolences and prayers to to the family and friends of Breonna Taylor. Surely missed, but not forgotten. And I looked at this, and from my understanding of the story, as far as what is reported, what I saw on Wikipedia, apparently the policeman. There's two different sides to the story. There's controversy over her death or passing, and as far as reasoning, I don't know if you could say reasoning behind her being shot, or just the general the situation. Because what happened was the cops, apparently they're saying they had there was a no-knock warrant. So if it was a no-knock warrant, they were basically able to go in there legally without knocking. But what makes this very perplexing is that, according to Wikipedia.org, on the shooting of Breonna Taylor, well, at least one of the policemen had his contention was that there was a knock, and they did go in there. They did knock prior to entering. Now, Breonna's boyfriend, I think his name was Kenneth Walker, he started firing things, stating he thought it was it was just a basic intruder, and he misconstrued the policemen for intruders. Now, the policemen are pretty much stating that they had let him know that who they were when they were coming in, but Kenneth Walker stated that he did not know that they were policemen, so he began firing. In the process, Breonna Taylor, I guess she gets caught in the crossfire. She was shot at least 8 times. I don't know. See, there's some circumstances with this Pisces energy. The fact that the sun was in Pisces at the time, you have Neptune in Pisces. In her chart, I wanted to say, first of her chart, her sun is in Gemini. Moon is in Sagittarius. Based on the solar/sunrise chart, I don't have her time of birth, so I had to improvise once again and do a solar/sunrise chart in which I put the sun at the same spot as the ascendant. But what I wanted to state was, in the solar/sunrise chart, it even adds more reasoning for a death that was really very befuddling, very confounding. A lot of where the details might be somewhat obscure in this, and we might never know the full extent, the full details as to this how this situation really went down. And the thing is, I don't know when she was shot, if the room was lit, if it was dark. Did she inadvertent? Did the police actually make an identification of that this is a woman, apparently, I would say, presumably not armed, and shot her anyway? Or did they shoot her because it was just so dark and they just didn't want to take any chances, and they said, well, okay, we're going to shoot anyone that's around that they feel might potentially be the shooter, because the vision may have been obscured, of course, if it was dark in that room when the firing ensued. Now, the thing about, and the police did counter, of course, with their firing, and Breonna got caught in the crossfire, basically. Again, she was shot at least 8 times. The thing about this is, too, she had, based on the solar sunrise chart, she had transit Mars hitting the 8th house at this time, and right there, that in Capricorn. So that could be an indicator of dying through gunfire by somebody in authority, person with the law in this case. And transit Mars was also in close proximity to her natal Neptune, which also made this a shooting that was very confounding, something where we might not ever get all the details. And the police were also there because they're stating that there was somebody that had been over there that had been, picking up drug packages, according to them. Even though there was a post, apparently there was somebody, I was a postmaster, someone prominent at the local post office, that stated something perhaps contrary to this, that refuted what the police stated, that they didn't have any kind of unusual like activity or packaging that was going over to that address where Breonna was ultimately, where she was shot. Uranus is also in that 8th house of death in the solar/sunrise chart for Breonna Taylor, and this is something too, where you're looking at, that could be an indicator of a death that could come very spontaneously and abruptly, very unpredictably, and being in Capricorn, something associated with authority, in this case police officers. Now, another thing I noticed too is that Uranus is conjunct Neptune as well in her chart, and you're talking about Uranus is associated with the internet. Neptune can be associated with filmography. This is something to me that you're talking about Neptune being filmography, and the fact that this went on the internet, and this is where, I mean, this story went all over social media, obviously, and this was going to be something that were her. It's not surprising that this was a death that transpired that was going to be connected with the internet and filmography very strongly. Now, another thing too, looking at this is what I'm some other transits as well at this time that might have played some role in her passing so untimely, is that at this time as well, she also had transit Pluto appears to be in the 8th house as well, which could be an indicator of being of a death through murder. That murder would manifest in a death, and I mean that's the way, I mean shoot, that's how the death would occur. And being close to Uranus again, one that could be very unpredictable, very spontaneous, and something that was going to be shown strongly on, emphasized on social media as well. At this time, she also had transit Mercury very close to her natal, making a conjunction to her natal Saturn in Pisces. Transit Mercury was in Aquarius at the time. Mercury could be connected with the news. This was some kind of news that was going to be obviously something that went down that was very, I mean, you could say it was bizarre, or something, or news that would be on social media. Aquarius can be associated with social media, the internet, and the fact it's conjoining her natal Saturn, something associated with the law and being with authority, I should say. And given that it's in the 10th house, this was something that was going to attain some kind of notoriety, exposure, and recognition. In the solar sunrise chart, she has the ruler of the 8th house in the 10th house, which is an indicator of where she might have been more famous, sadly, after she died than prior to it. It could be a death that gained some kind of notoriety, exposure, acclaim, and recognition. But also, she has one of the rulers of her 10th house in the 8th house of death. So conversely, it's really very similar. She could have, this is where notoriety can come from a death. And this is another indicator that she was likely going to be more famous, sadly, after she passed away than she was prior to it. Now, she worked as, I believe, some like emergency medical technician. She does have Scorpio on the 6th house cusp in the solar sunrise chart. This could be somebody that's employed through some kind of that works with crisis situations. She also has a Neptune in the 8th house. This is an indicator of doing something associated with healing and showing compassion in crisis situations. So another thing I'm seeing in her chart too is that she has Mars conjunct Chiron in the 4th house of the end of life. Mars by itself in the 4th house could be an end of life that could be very volatile and sometimes could be through gunfire. The fact that it's conjunct Chiron is an indicator of really stronger propensity. I mean, you're talking about, if you're going to, if the latter part of life, I mean, you're talking about Mars in the 4th house, the latter part of life can be rather volatile and violent. But when you're talking about the Chiron in that mix, that could be about more suffering in connection with an actual, more propensity for actual wounds. Mars by itself can do that, but then when you have Chiron in there as well, and Chiron also conjunct Mars as well. Chiron conjunct Mars by itself can be an indicator of some kind of wounds through gunfire. And this, you're talking about being in Leo with a lot of perhaps ferocity and and something that came out in a very, you could say, in a very loud, vociferous manner, something that gained a lot of notoriety and recognition. Leo is obviously not quiet energy. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that. I'm back. But anyway, now, so it's not surprising that there was some suffering and wounds that were associated with that end of life for her. And another thing I'm noticing too is that in her chart she also has the South Node conjunct her Sun in Gemini. Now, the South Node conjunct the Sun by itself could be an indicator, I would say, of some issues with the vitality and energy and the life. You're talking about in the 1st house of the early childhood. Now, she obviously, when she died, she was 26. That's not the early childhood. But when the South Node, theory I have is that if the South Node is conjunct the Sun, and you're talking about, even though it's a solar sunrise chart, it falls in the 1st house in the solar sunrise chart. Actually, the South Node actually falls in her 12th house, but it's conjunct her Sun in Gemini. So that could be, but the fact that it's hitting the Sun could be an indicator of perhaps an end of life, that life ending perhaps a little earlier than usual. This is something where at least there was when you have the South Node conjunct your Sun in your astrology chart, it can be an indicator of going away from life. And you're talking about, everybody passes away eventually, yes, but the fact that if you have that in your aspect, it tells me, the South Node in astrology can if it's conjuncting a point in your chart, it can affect that point to its detriment. And you're talking about the Sun being connected with life. So it's really not shocking that she did. When you look at all the other aspects natally and through transits, coupled with the fact that the South Node is conjunct her Sun in Gemini, it's not shocking or bewildering that she did pass on at a much earlier age than average. And being in Gemini, it wouldn't surprise me if she had some wounds that were by her arms, her hands, that were near her lungs, maybe shoulders. This is something that's very, obviously very tragic. This is something that could have very easily had been avoided. I think if people were just, maybe, I don't know if the policemen were completely dishonest and dishonorable and lacked integrity or what happened, but this is obviously something that could have been avoided somehow, some way, but it just it simply wasn't. The only other transit that I'm looking at this, as far as you're talking about as far as any natal placements or transits that might have been tied in with her passing, well, the transit North Node was very close to her natal Mercury when she was shot. And when you're talking about uh, North Node and Mercury making a contact, can be about the future, being associated with news and communication. This was something that, being in Mercury in the North Node Cancer, this is something that transpired in her home, and that actually probably, I'm sure, hit a lot of people close to home. It was something that caused a lot of Cancerian emotional energy, to say the absolute least. And uh, again, this is just it's something that again, not to be overly redundant, that should have been averted, should have been avoided, but sadly it wasn't. And this is sadly the end, the end result of this. And again, I do offer my prayers and condolences to the family and friends of Breonna Taylor. And anyway, that is pretty much it. So anyway, people, this is Edwin Learnard, and until next time, stay well.